They say you never truly know someone until you see what they'll do when they think you're not watching. I learned that lesson the hard way when I came home to find my sister had not just borrowed my house, but stolen my entire life. The Pacific Coast Highway stretched before me like a promise of peace after 6 months of architectural warfare in Manhattan. Every mile closer to Laguna Beach loosened another knot in my shoulders. The Newport Plaza renovation had been my most challenging project yet, 18-hour days of managing contractors, appeasing investors, and fighting for every design detail that would make the building sing rather than just stand. But I'd done it. The commission alone would fund my next 3 years, and the recognition would cement my reputation as one of California's premier sustainable architects. All I wanted was to collapse into my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by the carefully curated calm I'd spent 5 years creating. The scent of jasmine and sea salt through my bedroom window. The morning light filtering through the clerestory windows I'd designed myself. The absolute silence that only comes from living at the end of a private road, where the nearest neighbor is half a mile away. I should have known something was wrong when I turned onto Cliff Drive and saw the cars. Not just one unfamiliar vehicle, but 4. A beaten Ford F-150 with a Confederate flag sticker and rust eating through the wheel wells. A Honda Odyssey with those stick-figure family decals, except someone had drawn devil horns on all the children. A yellow Camaro with spinning rims that probably cost more than the car itself. And worst of all, my sister Bethany's unmistakable pink Volkswagen Beetle, the one she'd bought with the inheritance our grandmother had left specifically for my education. My foot eased off the accelerator. This had to be wrong. Bethany lived in Riverside, a solid 2 hours inland. She hadn't visited in 3 years, not since our mother's funeral when she'd spent the entire reception telling anyone who'd listen that I thought I was too good for family now that I had money. We'd barely spoken since just obligatory holiday texts and the occasional Facebook reaction. As I pulled closer, the damage became visible. My prized bird of paradise plants, the ones I'd imported from South Africa and nursed through 3 years of drought, were uprooted and dying on the lawn. Someone had spray-painted a crude anatomical drawing on my garage door. The Japanese maple I'd planted to commemorate my first major commission was snapped in half, its delicate branches scattered like bones. But the worst violation was on my deck. Bethany lounged in my custom restoration hardware chaise, wearing what looked like my white silk Armani robe, the one I'd bought myself after landing the museum project. She held a martini glass, no doubt filled from my wine collection, while talking animatedly with a woman I recognized with a sick lurch as Sharon Hendricks. Sharon, who'd made my high school years hell by spreading rumors that I was sleeping with teachers for grades. Sharon, who'd tried to seduce my college boyfriend at our 5-year reunion. Sharon, who had no business being within 100 miles of my home. Children ran wild across my deck, their screams piercing the ocean breeze. One boy, maybe 8, was drawing on my glass doors with what looked like permanent marker. A younger girl had my meditation cushions piled up like a fort, jumping on them with muddy shoes. And someone had definitely been using my reflecting pool as a swimming pool, based on the toys floating in what had been crystal clear water just 6 months ago. I parked and sat for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, documenting everything with photos and video. Then I got out, my keys gripped so tight they cut into my palm, and walked toward my own front door like I was approaching a crime scene. Which, I was beginning to realize, might be exactly what this was. The door stood open. Not unlocked, but actually open. Like security meant nothing. Music blasted from inside, some auto-tuned nightmare that made my teeth ache. I could smell cigarette smoke, which meant someone had been smoking in my home where I'd never allowed so much as a scented candle that wasn't organic soy. I stepped inside, and the full scope of the invasion hit me. My living room, which had been featured in Architectural Digest just last year, looked like a frat house after rush week. Pizza boxes covered my reclaimed teak coffee table. Beer bottles lined the mantel beneath my Rothko print. Someone had moved my furniture, shoving my carefully positioned Barcelona chairs against the wall to make room for an air mattress. Well. Bethany's voice came from behind me, dripping with false sweetness. Look who finally decided to show up. The queen returns to her castle. I turned slowly. She stood in my doorway, Sharon beside her, both of them smirking like they'd won some prize. Behind them, a man I didn't recognize emerged from my kitchen, shirtless, with a beer in one hand and my iPad in the other. This had to be Rick, the husband Bethany had mentioned in one of her Facebook posts, the one she'd met at a casino in Vegas and married 3 weeks later. "Get out," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "All of you. Get out of my house right now. Bethany laughed, actually laughed, throwing her head back like I'd told the world's best joke. Your house? Oh, honey, possession is 9/10 of the law. You abandoned this place for half a year. We've been taking care of it. Taking care of it? I gestured at the destruction around us. You've destroyed it. We've improved it, Sharon chimed in, her nasal voice exactly as grating as I remembered. All that minimalist crap was depressing. The place needed some life. Rick belched, long and loud, then grinned. Yeah, it was like a museum in here. No wonder you don't have a man, living in this sterile box. I wanted to respond, to tell them that I'd chosen this life, that my solitude was sacred, that my space was a reflection of my mind, and they'd violated both. But something made me push past them instead, heading for my office. If they'd been here long enough to get comfortable, there had to be more to this than simple trespassing. The office door was broken, hanging off its hinges like someone had kicked it in. Inside, my files were scattered everywhere. Tax documents, contracts, personal correspondence, all rifled through and discarded. But there on my desk, placed deliberately where I couldn't miss it, was a manila folder that didn't belong to me. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were legal documents, forgeries that made my blood run cold, an eviction notice filed against me, claiming I'd abandoned the property. A psychiatric evaluation stating I was mentally unfit to manage my affairs, complete with a doctor's signature I didn't recognize. Bank statements showing large transfers from my accounts to ones I'd never opened, and photos of me, taken without my knowledge, edited to make me look disheveled, unstable, like someone who needed intervention. Surprise, Bethany said from the doorway. Did you really think you could just leave everything behind and expect it to stay yours? Some of us have families to support, Brenna. Some of us need more than our fair share. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't a visit or even a typical family intrusion. This was a calculated takeover. They'd been planning this, probably since the moment I'd mentioned my New York project on social media. 6 months to establish residency, to build a case that I'd abandoned my life, to position themselves as the rightful occupants of my success. I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. The bitterness in her eyes, the cruel set of her mouth, the way she stood in my office like she owned it. This wasn't the girl who'd shared my bedroom growing up, who'd held my hand at our father's funeral, who'd once told me I could be anything I wanted. This was a stranger wearing my sister's face, consumed by envy so toxic it had eaten away everything good between us. You won't get away with this, I said quietly. Watch me, she replied. But she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. She saw a woman who valued peace and assumed that meant weakness. She saw success and assumed it came from luck rather than intelligence. She saw solitude and assumed it meant I had no one to turn to. She was wrong on all counts. I took photos of everything in the folder, then calmly walked past her, past the chaos, past the violation of my sanctuary. I got in my car and drove away, but not in defeat. I drove straight to Newport Beach, to the offices of Marcus Chen, my childhood friend who'd become one of California's most ruthless property lawyers. Marcus, who'd offered to handle all my legal affairs, but whom I'd turned down because I thought I'd never need that kind of aggressive representation. I needed it now. Marcus took one look at my face when I walked into his office and immediately cleared his schedule. Tell me everything, he said. And I did. Every detail. Every photo. Every forged document. His expression grew darker with each revelation, and by the time I finished, his fingers were steepled in the way that meant someone was about to face the full force of his legal expertise. They've made several critical errors, he said. First, squatters' rights don't apply when the owner has been paying property taxes, which you have. Second, forging psychiatric documents is a federal crime. Third, and this is my favorite part, they've left a digital trail a mile wide. Every transfer, every document, every edit to those photos has metadata. He pulled up his computer and started typing rapidly. We're not just going to evict them, Brenna. We're going to destroy them. Legally, financially, and publicly. They wanted your life? They're about to lose their own. The next 3 days moved with military precision. Marcus filed an emergency injunction citing fraud, identity theft, and criminal trespass. He contacted the banks and froze the accounts where my money had been transferred. He hired a private investigator who discovered Rick had a criminal record for check fraud, that Sharon was already on probation for embezzlement, and that Bethany had been fired from 3 jobs in the past year for stealing. While Marcus built our legal case, I built something else: documentation. I hired a professional crew to record every inch of damage to my property. We cataloged the destroyed plants, the broken furniture, the graffiti, the missing items. The bill came to over $200,000, not including the emotional distress of having my sanctuary violated. On day 4, we struck. I arrived at my house at 9 a.m. sharp, accompanied by Marcus, 2 uniformed police officers, and a court bailiff. The circus on my lawn stopped cold when they saw us coming. Bethany, still in my robe on my deck, stood up so fast she knocked over her morning mimosa. "What is this?" she shrieked. Officer Martinez, a tall woman with zero patience for nonsense, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we have a court order for your immediate eviction from this property, as well as warrants for your arrest on charges of fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny." The color drained from Bethany's face. Rick tried to run, actually tried to sprint for his truck, but Officer Dale was faster. He had Rick on the ground and in cuffs before the man made it 10 feet. Sharon started crying, ugly sobs that reminded me of every fake tear she'd produced in high school to get out of trouble. "You can't do this," Bethany screamed at me. "I'm your sister. Family doesn't do this to family." I stepped closer, close enough that only she could hear me. Family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't try to destroy what someone has built. Family doesn't forge documents and commit fraud. You stopped being my family the moment you decided my success was something you deserved to take. Marcus stepped in with the official eviction notice. "You have 30 minutes to gather your personal belongings. Anything that belongs to Miss Chen stays. Anything you've damaged will be added to the restitution you'll owe after the criminal trial." The neighbors had started gathering, drawn by the police cars and commotion. I recognized several of them, people I'd maintained polite distance from but who'd always respected my privacy. Now, they watched as my sister was handcuffed, as her husband was placed in a police car, as Sharon tried unsuccessfully to claim she was just visiting and had no idea about any fraud. Bethany's children, who'd been so wild and destructive, stood frozen and frightened. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for them. They didn't choose their parents. I pulled Marcus aside. "The kids? Child Services is already on the way. They have an aunt in San Diego who's agreed to take them temporarily." As Bethany was led past me to the police car, she turned one last time. "I hope you're happy alone in your perfect house with your perfect life." "I will be," I said simply, "because it's mine." The restoration took 3 weeks and a small fortune, but insurance covered most of it once Marcus proved the damage was from criminal trespass. I hired the best contractors, the same ones who'd worked on my initial renovation. They repaired every hole, every scratch, every broken fixture. I had an industrial cleaning crew eliminate every trace of cigarette smoke, spilled beer, and whatever else had been ground into my carpets. The meditation pool was drained, cleaned, and refilled. New plants replaced the destroyed ones, though it would take years for them to grow to the same magnificence. The garage door was repainted, this time with an anti-graffiti coating. The broken Japanese maple couldn't be saved, but I planted a new one beside it, letting the dead tree stand as a reminder that even destroyed things could nurture new growth. Marcus kept me updated on the legal proceedings. Bethany and Rick were both charged with multiple felonies. The forged psychiatric evaluation alone carried a 5-year sentence. The identity theft added another 10. Rick's prior record meant he was looking at serious time. Sharon flipped immediately, testifying against them in exchange for a lighter sentence, proving that she had exactly as much loyalty as I'd always known. The criminal trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Bethany tried to claim I'd abandoned her, that she was just trying to protect my assets, that she never meant for it to go so far. But the prosecutor had her Facebook messages, months of planning with Rick about how they'd take my house and my money. Messages where she called me a stuck-up bitch who deserved to be brought down. Messages where she detailed exactly how they'd forge the documents, establish residency, and claim I was mentally unfit. She got 7 years. Rick got 12. Sharon got probation and community service, but her reputation in Orange County was destroyed. The local news picked up the story. Architect's family attempts elaborate property fraud. Bethany's picture was on the evening news, her face twisted in rage as she was led from the courthouse. But the civil trial was where I found my real satisfaction. Marcus didn't just sue for damages, he sued for everything. Legal fees, restoration costs, emotional distress, lost work opportunities while I dealt with the crisis. The judge, a stern woman named Harrison, who'd clearly seen too many family disputes, awarded me everything we asked for and more. The violation of trust here is appalling, Judge Harrison said during the ruling. To have one's sanctuary, one's carefully crafted space, invaded by those who should be protecting it, is a cruelty that goes beyond mere property damage. The defendants showed a premeditated intent to destroy not just Miss Chen's property but her sense of security and peace. The judgment was for $1.2 million. Bethany and Rick would be paying me for the rest of their lives, their wages garnished, their assets seized. The house in Riverside was sold to pay part of the judgment. Their cars, their furniture, even Rick's prized motorcycle collection, all liquidated. I donated most of the money to a legal aid foundation that helps victims of family fraud. I didn't need their money. I needed my peace. 6 months later, my house had become more than restored. It had evolved. I'd added new security systems, not just cameras and alarms, but smart locks that could only be opened with biometric data. I'd built a separate guest house at the far end of my property, a place where welcome visitors could stay without entering my main sanctuary. But the biggest change was in me. I no longer hid from the neighbors. I hosted monthly gatherings for the local architectural society. I mentored young designers, especially women who'd been told their vision was too bold, too minimal, too much. My home became not just a sanctuary but a salon, a place where creativity could flourish under my protection. Mrs. Patterson from next door, who'd witnessed the police intervention, became an unexpected friend. She'd lived through her own family betrayal decades ago, a brother who'd tried to steal their parents' estate. We had tea every Sunday, sitting in my rebuilt garden, not talking about the past but planning futures. You know what I learned? She told me one afternoon, as we watched the sunset paint the ocean gold. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them. Who respects your boundaries. Who celebrates your success instead of trying to steal it. She was right. My chosen family grew stronger than my blood family ever was. Marcus, who'd fought for me when I was too shocked to fight for myself. My assistant James, who'd managed my New York projects remotely while I dealt with the crisis. My contractor Luis, who'd restored my house with the same care he'd used for his own. The prosecutors who'd taken my case seriously. The judge who'd understood that this was about more than property. A year after the invasion, I received a letter from Bethany in prison. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Brenna, it read, I've had time to think about what I did. I wish I could say I'm sorry, but I'm not. I'm only sorry I got caught. You always had everything handed to you. The grades, the scholarships, the career. You never struggled like I did. You never had to watch someone else succeed while you failed. I hope someday you understand what that feels like. Your sister, Bethany. I read it twice, then fed it to my new fire pit, watching the toxic words turn to ash and smoke. She still didn't understand. Nothing had been handed to me. I'd worked 18-hour days. I'd taken out crushing student loans. I'd slept in my car during graduate school to save money. I'd been rejected by 50 firms before landing my first job. I'd built my success one sleepless night, one rejected proposal, one revised blueprint at a time. But explaining that to someone consumed by entitlement and envy was pointless. She'd created a narrative where she was the victim and I was the villain, and prison walls wouldn't change that story in her mind. I had my own story to live. These days, my house is exactly what I designed it to be. A place of peace, but not isolation. A sanctuary, but not a fortress. The new Japanese maple is thriving, its roots intertwining with those of its fallen predecessor. The garden is more beautiful than before, because I learned that sometimes destruction makes room for better growth. I work from my rebuilt office, taking on projects that matter to me, not just ones that pay well. I designed a women's shelter in Santa Ana, incorporating the same elements of safety and beauty that I'd rebuilt into my own home. I created a meditation center in Ojai, where people could find the kind of peace that had been stolen from me, but that I'd managed to reclaim. Rick was released after 3 years for good behavior, but was immediately arrested on outstanding warrants in Nevada. Sharon moved to Florida and, last I heard, was selling timeshares and probably scamming tourists. Bethany still has 4 years left on her sentence. Her children were adopted by their aunt and are reportedly doing well, finally in a stable environment. Sometimes I walk through my house at night, feeling the ocean breeze through windows I'm no longer afraid to leave open. I touch the walls that were once defiled, run my fingers over furniture that was once violated, stand in spaces that were once occupied by people who wished me harm, and I feel nothing but gratitude. Not gratitude for what happened, but for what it taught me. That strength isn't about never being vulnerable, it's about how you respond when that vulnerability is exploited. That family isn't about obligation, It's about mutual respect and genuine love. That a sanctuary isn't just a physical space, it's a state of mind that no one can steal if you don't let them. The last time I saw Marcus, he asked if I regretted anything about how we'd handled the situation. Just one thing, I told him. What's that? I wish I'd installed security cameras before I left for New York. Would have saved us a lot of legal fees. He laughed, but then grew serious. You know, most people would have just let them stay, avoided the conflict, tried to work out some family compromise. Most people haven't spent 5 years building their dream space board by board, tile by tile. I replied. Most people haven't learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for toxic people is hold them accountable for their actions. Tonight, I'm sitting on my deck, the same deck where Bethany once lounged in my stolen robe, drinking my wine, planning my destruction. But she's in a federal prison cell, and I'm watching the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that no amount of money or envy can steal. My phone buzzes with a text from a new client, a tech executive who wants to build an eco-friendly compound in Big Sur. She says she heard about my work, about how I create spaces that are both beautiful and secure, sanctuaries that nurture while protecting. She doesn't know the full story of why I've become an expert in both aesthetics and safety. She doesn't need to. Tomorrow, I'll drive up the coast to meet her, to walk the land where her dream will rise. I'll help her build something beautiful and defensible, something that reflects her success without apology, something that no one can take from her. Because that's what I do now. I build sanctuaries for people who've earned them. But tonight, I'm simply home. In my space. In my peace. In the life I built, lost, and rebuilt stronger. The ocean whispers against the cliffs below, a sound Bethany complained about but that I find soothing. The jasmine blooms outside my window, its scent carrying on the salt air. The house settles around me like a embrace, every beam and board a testament to resilience. They tried to steal my sanctuary. Instead, they taught me that a true sanctuary isn't something that can be stolen. It's something you carry within you, something you can rebuild as many times as necessary, something that grows stronger with every challenge. And mine? Mine is unbreakable now. The stars are coming out, bright against the darkening sky. Somewhere, Bethany is probably lying on a narrow prison cot, thinking about the house she'll never have, the life she tried to steal. Somewhere, Rick is facing new charges, his con games finally catching up to him. Somewhere, Sharon is probably trying to scam someone else, having learned nothing from her brush with consequences. But here, in the sanctuary they tried to steal, I'm exactly where I belong. Not because I was handed this life, but because I built it, defended it, and rebuilt it better. Not because I'm special, but because I refused to let anyone convince me I didn't deserve what I'd earned. The wine in my glass is from my rebuilt collection, a bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Turns out, every evening in a space that's truly yours is special. Every moment of peace you've fought for is worth celebrating. Every boundary you've defended successfully is a victory. Cheers. I say to the ocean, to the stars, to the sanctuary that surrounds me, to learning that the only person who can truly steal your peace is you by giving it away. And I'll never make that mistake again.